Hello everyone. As we're waiting for people to arrive, I'm just admitting people as they come in. Settle in, welcome. Thank you so much for coming along today and joining us here for our next webinar, Reduce Risk, Burnout and Pressure on Decreasing Productivity. We are very excited to have you here today. And I know there may have been a little bit of a challenge with the Zoom link, so I know people are still popping in now. There we go, lovely. So if you can just pop in the chat that you can see and hear us clearly, make sure that you can see the slides, that would be wonderful. Give us a thumbs up or a yes in the chat. We really love to run our webinars and virtual training events as if we're in the room together. So we really encourage interaction, cameras on if you're able to. That would be wonderful. Join us here in the room and make sure that you interact throughout in the chat. That would be fantastic. And just while we wait just a couple more minutes for people to join us, we'd love to know in the chat where you're joining us from today. If you're happy to share, pop in your organisation. It's great to see who else is here in the room. And just so you know, Phil, my clicker has disappeared, so
Okay.
move the slides.
You tell me.
Yeah, so we'd just like to, I guess, begin, if you can move the slide, Phil, by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that we are all learning here today from, and would like to pay respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So I'm just pulling up the chat there. Joining from Bright Victoria, James. Fantastic. Loud and clear from Melbourne, Fairfield. Wonderful. Thanks, Silvano. And we've got some more people in the waiting room there. Wonderful. Very good. Thank you. So pop into the chat where you're from today. Oh, there we go. Fantastic. So our aim in the next hour really today is to equip you with practical tools to meet the new WHS Regulation Code and really go beyond compliance. So this is more about building a culture where people actually feel safe, where they feel energized and really ready to engage in the workplace. So if you're working to maybe reduce burnout or disengagement across your team, whether you want confidence with compliance as well, or maybe you need to tackle some tough conversations or really spot those early signs of psychosocial risk and maybe support people sooner, then this is definitely the session for you. So you can expect fast-paced, practical experience that's designed for busy leaders like yourselves. A few more people jumping into the chat over in Perth. Jeff, welcome. Lauren from Life Choices in Sydney, great to see you here again, Lauren. John joining from Sydney, which is wonderful. So I'd love to also just do a quick pulse check before we dive into the content. If you can pop into the chat, what is it that brought you here today? Would love to know what is it about this particular topic that intrigued you, and what is it that you're curious to hear from our guest speaker today. So pop into the chat, and as you're popping into the chat, I'd just like to touch on our roadmap today that you can see here on the screen. So we're really going deep into why compliance isn't enough. And we're looking to what those recent WHS or OHS shifts mean for leaders and how to really move from that tick box to a really proactive culture. We're also going to be covering what's called a T shift. Roderick's going to explain what a T shift means. So it's new language and really a toolkit for leading safer and healthier teams. And also how to turn everyday interactions into those moments of connection and trust. We're also going to be looking at the hidden cost of burnout and how to build a culture that really supports and backs people up. So practical ways to normalize people asking for help, to reduce risks at the source, and also to help lift performance. So we're really excited about today's webinar, and I'm going to hand you across to our two wonderful experts in just a moment. But before I do that, would love to just share with you briefly an introduction to the leadership sphere in terms of the areas that we cover for those of you who are potentially new to our community. So we specialize in building leadership capability across three streams, as you can see there on the screen. Individual excellence is where we build leadership capability through executive coaching, through development programs, applied MBAs, and also tools that are tailored to individual growth. That can be from emerging leaders right through to executives. Also, team excellence. So we help teams to increase their effectiveness through team diagnostics, through leadership modules and training, and group development experiences as well. And then also from an organizational perspective, we support whole of organization change by really aligning leadership and strategy and culture to empower that transformation at every level. So we truly love to collaborate with organizations and develop bespoke leadership pathways. And so really the invitation today is, if this topic or if this resonates with you, is to reach out to us for a conversation around how we can support you and your leaders, whether it is around building psychosocial safety and building a culture around that, or beyond. So I'd love to introduce now our founder and CEO, Phillip Ralph, and Roderick Cross, a long-time TLS partner and consultant. Pass over to you,
Awesome.
Phil.
Thank you, Kelly. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Wonderful to see you here and wonderful to see so many familiar faces, people who have come to many webinars before or people we're already working with. So it's we really have a lot of gratitude for you being here today, and it's such an important area. So I'm looking forward to really learning as well as we go on this journey of potentially quite a complex area, I think. But before we get into that and I introduce Roderick more fully, so many of you are familiar with us, so I'm not going to spend much time talking about us, but bridging from what Kelly said around those three development streams. And I think our purpose really drives a lot of what we do, and that is about enabling leaders to make a positive difference in the world. And we do that through things like courage, authenticity, and purpose. And that's really important. And we feel like the organizations around Australia and internationally need that more than ever before. So really strong leaders who really get systems and get adaptive change. So that's really important to us. So we're really happy to be presenting another webinar. And for me, this webinar particularly is, as I said before, I think one area that we all need to navigate, whether we're a consultant, a coach, a leader, a CEO in organizations, we need to be across the legal obligations, the code of practice, all the things that are happening. And it's potentially a minefield in terms of the governance, and then what are our responsibilities as leaders to really really make a tangible difference in this area, because the stakes are higher than they've ever been before. So with that, I have a lot of pleasure in introducing Roderick, who is a colleague and friend of mine, and colleague and friend of TLS, and we've been friends and colleagues for many, many years. Roderick is an absolute powerhouse in this area and really cuts through a whole lot of the noise to really make it much clearer, and is going to present, I guess the narrative, the bit of background, and then what we can actually do in a very practical sense. So, Roderick, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. It's actually absolute delight to be here. And I guess from my perspective, to say welcome to each of you. And Silvano, I see that you actually put in there about understanding yourself, your thinking, and how you can support your team, and also understanding, I think it was James said about understanding the regulations. So we've got our time together today. So what is backups? It's about building a culture of unifying psychosocial safety. From our perspective, it's based on working with more than 1,000 leaders, and our original research was understanding about burnout and resilience, and then how that links to giving your best, bringing the best out in others, navigating those times when we actually all struggle and then get back up, but keep performing well, and then how we take those lessons learned to take it further. So what are we going to do today? We're going to explore what is backups, and why is it needed, but most importantly, why is it needed now? An introduction, really, an overview of how it works, and then where we know this can lead from our experience working with our clients. The graphic on the slide here is the takeaway from the whole program. It's a graphic organizer at the moment. It means nothing to you. And our program is designed to be a conversation starter, regardless of where you sit in the organization, to be able to say this stuff matters. So how do we actually engage in it? So I'll show you this graphic at the end, and it'll make a whole lot more sense. So firstly, what is backup? We know that's actually an integrated program that provides a way to change the way we actually work together. It's really from a nice to know to a must have skills and knowledge and confidence for us as individuals, teams and whole organizations. It helps meet compliance with the regulations and code. It helps proactively create and maintain a safer and key here, healthier workplace systems and environment. And it builds the positive psychosocial safety culture that sustains productivity and performance. The key word there is positive. We now have a positive obligations under a number of pieces of legislation, especially as the work environment gets more complex. A good example would be the respect at work, where we now have a positive duty rather than a reactive duty. So typically when we ask this question, how are you doing? We might just answer fine, yep, good, not so bad. But really, if you had to summarize psychosocial, it's actually asking two parts. It's how are you, the Kelly, the Sarah, the Roderick, and the James, how are you doing? How are you navigating what's actually happening in your life to be able to do what you need to do at work to perform to the standard you want? And what is it really all about? Really, it's about a unified code and regulations, and Victoria's coming on board. And now we'll actually have right across Australia a standard for managing the risks of psychosocial hazards at work. And it is mandating the prevention and risk mitigation obligations for us as individuals and leaders and whole organisations that physical hazards and psychosocial hazards are actually the same. Learning these skills and knowledge won't just be good for you in performing well and sustaining your productivity, but it's actually must-have skills that as we work through the changing in global work, we now work across jurisdictions, in fact, we now work across the globe. And in fact, these skills are skills that are actually expected in every country now. And so learning this will benefit you not beyond just what I've got to do today, but actually will benefit you over the longer period as well. So a quick refresh. What does the WHS Act actually say? Well, the object of it is to provide a balanced, nationally consistent framework to secure the health and safety of workers and workplaces. Now, of course, workplaces aren't just bricks and mortar where we travel to. It's our homes, it's in the airport, it's at the Christmas party, it's actually across, for example, I've got an executive EA and I only met her face to face once. So it's the virtual world as well. And so another part of the object of the Act, it's not just work health and safety, it's actually improving it over time. It's the idea of progressively higher standards. So the standard, if you like, in the program that starts with this first line, it's the ground level. The standards are what is okay and what is not okay. And so that allows you to say, well, okay, there's the line. So to summarize the Act, it says, here's the line, and you shouldn't have to worry about where that is, because if that's the ground, then it's being held up by two pillars, two solid foundations. Secure the health of workers and their highest level of protection for each worker from harm through the elimination and minimization of risk and hazard for all work and workplaces, so we can perform our duties and jobs well. So if we lay this end to end, starting on the left-hand side, the physical hazards come from the work environment, the plant, the structures, how we're trained. Those hazards pose a risk to health and safety, and they have a downstream impact, both positive and negative. And so if we explore this a little bit further, the hazards arise from these types of things, and they're all very familiar to us. And so a quick case study. For the visual learners, you can have a read. And for the auditory learners, I'll just tell you the story quickly. The organisation's replaced all the refrigerators. Good news, you now have ice on demand, so you can have iced coffees. And that allows you to, like my children, they don't drink hot tea or coffee, they have ice things. So yay. Unfortunately, there's a number of these fridges right across the nation, and they all seem to be leaking water. And we now have puddles of water on the floor in a continuous way over a longer period of time. So what would you do if that was the scenario for you, either as a team member or as a manager? Would you mind popping some things in the chat box? Fridge is leaking, water on the floor. What actions would you take? Or what would you do? Who's going to pop something in there? Or you can just put your hand up.
Yep, we've got Lauren, mop it up. Marita, clean it up myself and report it. Phil, clean it up. Lauren, find the leak.
Yeah. Very good. If I let you keep on going, you'd come up with some fantastic ideas. But how did you know what to do? It was pretty instant. You had a way of being and the way of doing it. And how you did that was to say, okie dokie, the hazards arise from work. What do we do about that when they turn up? And we do that through the risk management process, which is well known. We refer to the 5 C's. And so let's explore this a little bit more detail. It starts at the center. It's actually commitment. First C is commitment of leaders and managers to say this matters. Then moved out and supported through the control measures. Identify the hazards. What was the hazard? The fridge was leaking. And what was assess the risk? It's how long has it been going on? How severe is it? And then you put in place control measures. Eliminate it. Well, you could have unplugged the fridge, and then you minimize by actually doing protection and putting things in the way, and administrative things like you actually put up little signs, be careful you don't slip, and then you monitor that over time. Now, we take that further by doing the next 3 C's, which is where we actually consult with each other, coordinate, and cooperate. The idea is someone sends an email, report it up the line, you actually monitor how that goes. We're replacing the fridge in 3 weeks, 2 weeks. We count it down to make sure we're doing what we're doing. The intent here is that we speak to each other to understand what's going on, express our views, with the point being is that we actually then contribute to solutions. And that allows us, the intent here is to identify and resolve the risks and the hazards early. Remembering the principle here is the highest level of protection that you can. So controlling at the root cause, the fridge, rather than repeatedly at the impact, wiping up the water every morning. Every morning is still risky. But of course, it's not an either or. It's what do we need to do at the highest levels from the organization level down to each of us take responsibility, like Phil did, wiped up the water. So the way to view this, it's almost like a hierarchy. We actually do a lot of talking to each other, lots of consultation. How do you see it? What could we do? When's that going to get done? We call those 3 happen regularly, the control measures and the commitment. And so together they work very well to set the standard for how we actually keep safe and perform our duties well. So how do we know to do that? Well, the 3 legal tiers of the legal framework: acts, regulations, and codes. By the time increasing detail and specificity, by the time you get to codes of practice, it's really detailed. Guidelines, how to do it, and points out the key roles: role of worker, role of officer, role of person who owns the organization, people with management control, and responsibilities and obligations, duties to what you must do and you should do and you can do. And in the end, how did you know what to do? Well, it was based on the idea you knew, but then you had to take the next step, which is to raise your hand and take action, or not step over the water. And it's also about raising your voice. Hey, has anyone noticed the water's on the floor all the time? Or do you remain silent? So the key here to take away is actually that happens because we have psychological safety. The belief that we can speak to each other, raise concerns, look at ideas. Many organizations and in backups, we encourage and utilize the idea of psychosocial safety. So Amy Edmondson's work is brilliant, and we encourage the use of it all the time. We think that is very good practice, and it's a very good convention to use. But is it everything we need? And our answer was, there's more. So what influenced whether you did take action or remain silent or not? Well, the answer is culture. And culture, if standards set the line for what you must do, culture sets the expectations. So culture gets the line. And it says, well, this is actually what you do, you should do. Well, this is actually what, around here we don't do that, or around here we do that. We are clear about what's okay and what's not okay. And so that base level line is actually held up really well by those 2 things, expectations and standards. So we want us to have common language to understand these things together. And so our definition of culture is the environment where we have shared expectations, how we do what we do, And the standards we set and adhere to through the quality of our relationships to co-create greater beneficial value, the key here is built one conversation at a time. And so the regulations set the standards, the 5 C's. Well, we have to add a 6th C now, and that actually holds the whole thing together. And so we refer to this as the pyramid of success. So whether you raise your hand, and we use this concept in the backups program, a backups culture is one where you are willing to raise your voice and raise your hand. And that shape there is the mathematical symbol called a radical. We'll talk more about that. But the key here is also the other definition of radical. Radical denotes something that is actually difficult or different against the usual tradition. And you actually face risks from being radical about standards. Well, we refer that to being a leader. Of course, when you actually raise your hand and raise your voice or remain silent, take action or don't, it has a psychological impact or benefit to you as well. What turns up in my attention and my mind, and what turns up in my emotions and my physical self. Mm-hmm. And so holistically, being willing to be radical actually is areas of development that we work on in the backups program. So altogether, the image now is growing. The idea is the baseline is set by standards expectation. The pillars hold it strong because that's what the regulations say. When we get below the line, we have a methodology. When it gets down here, the radical take the steps to do more to take us back up again, and it's held in place by the 6 C's. Culture is what unifies and aligns each of us, and the regulations is really clear, and the code of practice gives a lot of detail about understanding there are differences between us, our years of experience, our education, how long we've been in the organization, our power structure, and to recognize it names people at risks or as the vulnerable. And so culture is what says that each of us, regardless of those things, actually can and should raise our hand, and when we do, know what happens next. So when we think about physical safety hazards, slips, trips, falls, lifts, abuse, crashes, chemicals, we actually have a very strong sense of the 5 C's and how it works. And it serves us well. It's mature, it's known, and it's owned. But the key here is they're very visual, they're very observable, and you can measure them. They're objective and rational. We can measure and monitor them over time, and it's been incredibly successful, changing culture, changing success profile for the last 40 years. So let's explore the downstream impacts of getting it right and not necessarily getting it right. So this is a Safe Work Australia compilation of compensation statistics. This is the 2023 data. Have a quick look at that information there, the snapshot. What do you notice? What stands out to you? You can just turn your mic on and just say what stands out to you. Who'd like to go first?
8 weeks lost is a lot of time.
So for the team of 5 and one of you is away, could you cover 8 weeks? Yeah. And if I gave you more time, you know, it's 29,000, well, it's 129,000 people did not return to their front door in the same way they were in the morning they left or that before they left. Of course, if you get this right, it has incredible benefits to brand reputation. We want to do business there. We want to work there. When you're there, your performance is high and productivity over time. Of course, investors want to invest in your company, and your boss wants to invest in your work, and your premiums and work cover decreases. And the good news is this actually has been very successful for physical hazards over the last 40 years, and this data here represents the last 20 years. And so the data tells us we're having great success reducing physical injuries and harm. So, yay, job done. We can all go home. That's fine. Don't you reckon? Thumbs up. So before I go any further, are there any questions? Have a stretch. We've been at this for a little while. Yeah, do have a stretch. Thank you, Nicole. I saw that was a big beauty. You got to do it. Look after yourselves. Are there any questions?
Nothing coming through at this stage, Roderick.
Radio. Let's keep going then. So if the 6 C's are working, what has changed and why? Well, the cue lands just here over the last around 10 years or so, there's a flattening out and now an increase in injury and harm. And if we actually explore that, what is that about? It's actually, well, the code and regs are working well for physical, but for psychological health, injury and harm, yeah, not so much. And the data shows us that that's actually on an upward trend right across the world. And so all over the world, but in Australia, the Safe Work Australia looked backwards and did a big review with Mental Health Commission and a whole bunch of other contributors. And they said, what's going on here? And released a thing called the Bolton Review in 2028. A number of findings, but this is the key one. While the work health and safety laws already deal with psychological health at work, work-related injury data, and our experience indicates that the existing framework is not operating effectively. And so the idea here is to recognize that a lot of organizations, and in fact, one jurisdiction uses this as a model. They talk about where should the effort go. The effort should be think about the environment, think about the physical hazards in that environment and apply the risk management process, monitor, report, and react. Remember, the highest level of protection should be at that level, quite right. But they literally use this metaphor. The people, the impact is actually like goldfish. And so there's no point having a toxic culture or a toxic work environment and putting the goldfish back into it. So people are at risk and they need to be protected. And if they are injured, they need to be fixed through policy and other reactive things, which can be beneficial, don't get me wrong. But it sets up this, well, I've just have good policy, or we've just got a good system of monitoring. And if something happens, we can fix it, or we'll try and prevent it. And so the way to think about it, it's not actually been working for psychological injuries at all. So let's explore the psychological impact at the other end here. This is the same report, and it's just notice the difference. This time it's mental health conditions. What's the contrast comparing that last data that I showed you? What stands out to you?
"34 weeks lost."
5 in a team, someone's away, 8 weeks maybe, 34, different story, hey? Almost 4 times as much compensation. And it's 11,700 people did not return home in the same state which they left. Now, I'm not going to go into it, but this is just an example. This is the following year's report, the 2024 report. Notice now it's 14,600, 37 weeks. It's a 25% increase in numbers. So evidently, even back to the Bolton Review, this isn't successful or sufficient. And so one of the key recommendations of the Bolton Review was to amend the work health regulations to deal with identifying the psychosocial risk associated with psychological injuries and the control measures. This is the first time psychosocial has ever occurred or ever been included in regulation. And so it's important to notice the difference. It's not psychological, it introduces psychosocial. And so there is actually no absolute definition of psychosocial in the regulations or the code. So here's the way to think about it. It's actually the psycho part is the individual, and this is the real wording from the code. It's the worker's individual experience of frequent, prolonged, severe stress response and the risk that has on health. So that's the individual. And the psycho part, the social part, is the environment, which will likely explore. These things lead to the hazards. The negative consequences are well researched and well documented. I'm sure you've seen more reports than the ones listed here. Burnout is on the rise. Performance is issues all over the place. Staff turnover is, for some sectors, at all-time high. Engagement is dropping. Productivity is dropping. We've heard a lot about that in the last 3 months. And brand and reputation investment consequences. Of course, it's also to recognize that now this is actually being targeted at particular segments. And in our program, we run through a series of case studies and also case law. In this example here, staff are actually threatening to sue the CEO and the managers themselves for actually impact from psychosocial harm. This is not going to go away. This is an example from case law from Victoria, where a significant amount of money was actually penalised the organisation for its culture and citing psychosocial hazards and risks not being identified and controlled. if we get this right, of course, it makes a massive difference as well. And we've all worked in terrific organizations. And that's part of the catalyst for our byline for backups, is to say this is about being proactive, and it's also about optimizing our performance, but also our performance and productivity for the whole organization over time. The regulations is a snapshot from the model regulations, but it says what is a hazard, a risk, how do you manage that, how do you measure it and monitor it, and how do you control it. But just have a look at the difference here. Psychosocial hazards arise from or relate to, yep, work environment, plant at work, that's the same for physical, but note these two new things: design and management of work, and workplace interactions and behaviors. And so that's a pretty significant difference. And so when now we're thinking about the psychosocial hazards, we have to think, wow, it's actually named: behaviors, interactions, work design, and how work is actually managed. So to understand, to apply the 5 C's for this, we actually have to understand what the psychosocial hazards are. And so here's the list of hazards, the WorkSafe Australia list, if you like, 17 here. I'll let you just cast your eye on those. Some will be very familiar to you, and some will be, oh, hang on, is that one? Just give me a thumbs up when you've actually seen enough. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Sarah. So I'm going to come back to it. And so here's a quick case study. Okay, for the visuals, start reading. For the auditory, you ready? You're an organization. It's team of 5. It's hybrid. Someone's left and it's taken a while to recruit someone, and they're in now, but they're taking a while to get up to speed. What you've noticed is a lot of priorities and a lot of pressures actually happening, and there's been a restructure for the organization around a couple of months ago. You've noticed the deadlines and quality of your work isn't how you'd like it to be. And you've also noticed that there's actually something happening around the team. There's increasing pressure, and there's less patience and more rudeness. And the boss is kind of nice, but not really available support and not really listening well and providing guidance. So, think about the 5 C's. I'm going to give you the hazards again. Which of these hazards might be involved in this case study? So at the top is the summary of the case study. At the bottom is the hazards. So maybe just drop them in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. Which hazards do you think are coming into play? Psychosocial hazards.
Rowena said poor support. Lauren said fatigue. James, poor relationships.
Yep.
Poor support, lack of clarity.
Yeah. So if I let you keep going, you'd go, oh, well, quite a few of them. Or which one's first? And that's how we work with our clients, is to recognize that first we actually need to know what they are. But if we gave you enough time to start noticing psychosocial hazards, you'll actually start noticing some big contrast between physical hazards and psychosocial hazards. And we'll explore those as we go further today. But I just want to show you how we flipped it. And rather than saying these are psychosocial hazards and need to be identified and controlled, we're taking more the Canadian Mental Health Commission perspective that talks around these being what they refer to as components. We refer to them as hazards, or opportunities for progress for teams, individuals, and systems. And if you know it and share how this happens, it makes a radical difference. And so we've converted all this list into what we refer to as 4 opportunities to make it safe, S-A-F-E. And we've actually then allocated and done analysis like using the thinking from Gallup from its Q12. There's a hierarchy. At the top, individuals and teams can say the number one thing we need to have is clarity, job clarity. What's the job that needs to get done to what standard? If you satisfy that, you then go, well, what's the job control? How could we do that? And then you work your way down. By the time you're getting down to the bottom, you're actually much more along next level manager, whole organization system. So this is what we refer to in our program as a T tool. How do we focus our time, energy, and attention to the highest priority for benefit our performance and productivity? And so we work with our clients to actually use these T tools, and it's part of the suite of resources and processes of the program. And what is a T tool? Well, a T tool is short, sharp, practical, useful, bite-sized tools about valuing, leveraging our time, energy, and attention. And it's about making progress. In the time it takes to pause, think about it, have a cup of tea. You don't have to have the tea, just have the time for reflection. And then say, where can I make progress? It's what is it? So what does this actually mean for us? And what if we did this? Hands up, those who'd like a copy of the Psychosocial SAFET tool. It's not just the front page, it's the back page and how you can use it individually and how you can use it with teams. Good news, you all get one. It's very, Kelly's telling me that, and we've got a bank of 50 T tools that are really practical. You know, they focus on the big ones we know from our research: imposter phenomena, procrastination, boundaries leaking all over the place. How do I say no when I always say yes? And so please feel free
Sorry,
to.
Roderick, by the way, Nicole says you're better than Oprah.
Oh, you get a card. I don't know where you are, Nicole. So I'll send you, it's not here, but I'll come back to it later. We actually have T tools for teams called Team Time. You reach out to me and I'll send you one of those. Of course, also, we're a data-driven organization. We think lots of organizations just get into this and get started wherever the noise is. And we know that's useful sometimes, but it's much better to be informed, isn't it? And so we, as part of our program and work with our clients, we do where is the best place to start and how do you work on that? And so, I'm sorry it's a little bit small, but this is the psychosocial hazards listed by the SAFE. And this is one organization, 149 people. And you notice their heat was for job demand, fatigue, and change management. And what they're really doing well is the environment, support, and job clarity. So we provide this data for them, and then we actually work a plan about what they can do to make the change. We don't make the change because they've done the program, and this organization, all 400 people did the program. So right from the top, CEO, right through to the latest recruit. So they have common language, a way to work. So you may be thinking, dear Lord, Roderick, that's enough. Can't we have a break? You can. So have a stretch.
Hey, Roderick, there has been a question that
Yes,
I'd like
please.
to circle back to.
Yeah.
Marita popped in, and I think it's a good one. She thought she might have asked the question too soon, and maybe it's something that you're going to be covering in the next session. But
Yeah.
she's asking, how do we challenge mindsets? Because we can see the physical injuries. We all know you can see the physical injuries, but you can't see the psychological or the psychosocial hazards. So how do we challenge mindsets?
Yeah. Hey, can I be that person who says, can we circle back to see, did I give you some clues about how to do that? The short answer is we do it together. And the long answer is it takes time to do this. And you'll see the sort of the idea about how do we have a unifying culture that allows us to do this well. So let's jump in a little bit further. Sorry,
Also, Roderick, if I can jump in, another
Yeah.
question, and what is burnout from Nicole? So whether you want to address that now or later as well.
Yeah, I will address that later.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you for the question. So, hey, I said, anyone got any questions? And I've not answered both. But we will. I promise you we will. So this doesn't look different, but this actually, we've changed this flow sheet now. And now because it's psychosocial, we've included this. This thing here is very different. It's the inclusion, the difference between physical and psychosocial. And so let's address that. This is literally what it says. Psychosocial hazards arise from, well, psychosocial, we taught that before, but they cause harm through what? And workers' individual experience, frequent, prolonged, or severe stress response. The code defines stress as, the code, not us, stress is the body's reaction or response when a worker perceives the demands of their work exceeds their ability and resources to cope. So that is really fundamental to the program. Understanding this is what links the hazards to the health impact. And so in our program, we actually switch from coping to capability. Ability, so capability is cap, the CAP, there is about what you can take. What is your ability at this time in this context? and adapting. And I know that at the leadership sphere, we use a lot of work about adaptation. And so we still have the base level, we still have the radical to be able to do that, but we focus on TEA, that we do this together. And Marcy, I think this is kind of getting to your question. So how do the hazards increase the risk to health? Well, let's explore this. It doesn't really have a lot of detail on the model. It has some, but this is the Queensland Code. So it talks about how do the hazards, how does stress impact health? And this is what it says. Health is on a continuum of responses which workers experience, with health at one end and injury at the other end. Individuals' experience may move back and forth over time. So have a look at this continuum. Healthy, reacting, struggling, psychological injury. Kind of useful, but maybe not. So we've got a kind of response to that. And so when we say, how are you doing? How we ask, when we ask, what we do next takes a whole new importance. And so we want to summarize the difference between psychological and psychosocial safety. Psychological safety is well known, as we described before, but psychosocial safety is clearly different. It's the legal requirements to create a safe work environment, setting the standard for each of us, for us to be able to maintain our health and well-being and perform our jobs and duty. This is actually best practice and should be skills and knowledge we have. Doing this will actually support compliance. Yeah, but how do you build a psychosocial safety culture, Roderick? Well, I know, Phil, it seems hard to believe, but I'm going to say, are there any questions? And maybe not. Maybe I'll just keep on going. Did anything else turn up? Or I'll just keep going, righto. So here's how we do it. We actually see what we already know from physical safety. It's a brilliant system where really, look how quickly you raised your hand and spoke up about the leaky water. How do we apply that for psychosocial? And how we do that is see the opportunities. So let's explore them. Firstly, and this is coming back to Marcy's question, I think, the type of that. Psychosocial hazards are dynamic, contextual, they interact. The literal code says they interact and combine and should be considered collectively. Yet they're not really well known or understood. So we see the first opportunity is about knowing and owning them and it's going to take time to do that. And this is referred to as know it and share it. The second one is the hazards are actually experiential. They're actually relational, not just rational. They're more subjective than objective, and they're less able to be observed, measured, and monitored with objective processes. Therefore, the opportunity is how do we create safe ways, and we refer to these as conversations, to share with each other and be heard. The third one is understanding health is a state, and that's contextual, dynamic, and on a continuum, and it's based on our inner experiences of stress from the hazards. Look, the reality is for those hazards, actually some of these things and the impact on my health and stress and my ability to cope can be difficult to discuss, let alone disclose. So the opportunity is how do we normalize struggling? How do we normalize asking for help and supporting each other during those times of struggle, but also when we're striving and thriving? So it's about knowing it, sharing it, showing it together. And the last opportunity is understanding that the reporting of psychosocial hazards is the same as physical hazards. It's an action obligation for each of us. But the sharing of ideas and solutions through the 5 Cs actually is critical to us to have managing them positively and early. So the opportunity is positive, equity, and empathy to find those solutions. We refer to this as show it and sort it. So Backups is the program that links these two things together. It's about unifying us, the standards and expectations. It's a system, team, and individual safer, healthier, so we can perform, adapt to whatever the context and cultural challenges may throw at us. And we do that through common language, shared practice, and committed action, built one conversation at a time. So rather than best practice, we refer to this as culture and next practice. So the integration here, there's an article on our LinkedIn site if you want to read some more about these. And this is what we do. This is we transition, take that trick, take that tick, and then we actually build off it. So I'm conscious of also of time here, so I'm getting there. The idea here is how do we do this? Well, it's about developing confidence and competence. And that's built through that culture of common language. So you and I, we all know, what do you mean by struggle? What do you mean by health or stress? So common language, so we can actually see it, transparent, that's what we're talking about. It's about shared practices and processes. So we can actually still do the 5 C's, the risk management process well, but we add in conversations. Share it, show it. But it's truly about committed action. To have the skills and knowledge, the practical tools and resources to be able to do this well. So how do we sort this at the individual, internal experience, my psychology, as well as the external world, and through teams and systems to build that positive relationships, to build the positive environment. So therefore, each of us knows that when we're actually adapting, there are many times we need to raise our voice, speak up, listen well. But the key here, maybe it's answering the question, is knowing who to go to, how to help, and especially where some of those topics are really difficult to talk through. Backups is evidence-based. We use best practice and next practice, very resource and tools-based that are energizing, positive, and practical. And there's 4 tiers here. We start with education. What is this about and why do I need to know it? That's kind of what today has been. Then we step into engage. Okay, if that's what it means, what does that actually mean to me and our business or our team? And then, okay, so what can we do about, realistically can we do about this? So we're equipped to do that. And then empowerment. Well, okay, so if that's what we can do, what if we did this? Leading to high performance, sustained productivity, and business outcomes. So we've already explored the T tools and also about the data gathering. So the program also includes learning. The minimum we can do is 90 minutes, but mostly it's around half day, but even greater full day. And we did a program last week with an executive team, and they left saying, this isn't a good could have, this is a wow, let's get great at this. They're a private company, they work in multiple jurisdictions. They were sort of saying, wow, what if this was what it's like around here? We understand about standards and expectations, and we've all got a part to play. It's based on our research. I told you at the beginning of 1,000 people we asked those 3 questions to, and they identified 3 factors which are part of the program, which you've already introduced you to, and we explore these all the way through. The first one is that people, when they were able to perform at their best and bring their best, were very, very respectful and positive about their relationship. They valued it and also utilized it with their own and others' key resources, their time, energy, and attention, TEA. So the idea is to recognize that T tools are about, hang on a second, I'm asking something of someone, what's actually happening in the context, and am I asking to shift focus or context? What's the priority? How do we do that well? T tools, we've already talked about. Now back to answering the other question, what about burnout? Well, T is also a foundation. We said our original research was on resilience and burnout. And in part of the program, we have a T tool called No One Wants BO, No One Wants Burnout. And so we actually walk through burnout. What is it and what is it not? It's not a mental health diagnosis. So just the quickest overview and why we use TEA is because it's the 3 dimensions of burnout. That we have reduced efficacy. In other words, we have time disconnect. I used to do this many and this time I don't do that anymore. The second thing is that feeling of energy depletion. I cannot recharge. And the last one is that mental distance from your job, kind of negative or cynicism. My attention is all over the place and nowhere, and we call that attention deficit, TEA. So rather than responding with burnout, we call burning bright, not burning out. And that's why the T tools are designed intentionally to help us not get there. As I said before, I'm going to send you one, Nicole, but anyone else can have some as well. These are T tools. We just do, the whole organization does the same team tool together at the same time. And so, for example, we encourage people to do the first one, which is don't use the B word anymore. The B word, of course, could be many things. It's the busy word. What if you never use busy for a month and won't notice the difference? And if someone does use busy, what do you do? And if you're using busy, how do you use an alternative? The second factor was knowing why, where, when, and how to make time and hold radical conversations that are thoughtful, empathetic, and authentic. And we have found from our research that that was one of the biggest differences. They were willing to raise their hand and raise their voice about their own stuff, but also with others. And we work through people, how do we have these tea talks? How do we get good at them? And it's not different to courageous conversations or fierce conversations. It's not that, but it's also how do we do it with ourselves and with others and do it well, a common practice. So of course we have to add a seventh C, Roderick. Dear Lord, Roderick. Okay, so you notice the pyramid now we have many, many, many more of these conversations. And it actually allows us to be successful through the other C's as well. So radical conversations have this idea about setting the standard expectations, and rather than seeing them as problems, they actually see them as potential. If something's below the line, it's not okay, but the culture says that's a potential to do better. The second thing is to have the growth mindset, to understand it is normal for our standards to go below the line, either for ourselves, our performance, or relationship and behavior. And so to get back up, it's not okay. It's just not okay yet. And so some people, it feels like just stepping up, walking up the stairs. For others, it's climbing a ladder. But for some of us, some of the time, it's like climbing a rope ladder. And we need scaffolding to help us to do that well, rather than being persecuted and punished. The last one we've already talked about a little bit, but it's a really important one, and one of the closest to our heart as an organization from our research as well, is that they were really clear about being radical about their own standards. They knew what okay was. If they're a nurse or a teacher or a doctor or a pilot, they actually said, I know what good is, and I'm going to hold myself accountable for my standards and for others as well. And also they were radical about their own health. They looked after themselves, early, positive, proactive, to keep healthy. And so they are recognizing here that clearly we know when something's okay and not okay. But our research said the actual magic lies here. Is that okay? Is it all right? And that's where we see best opportunities for us to do even better together. And so we also work through people we take the codes continuum and we apply our research. We've just identified areas, states. Remember, health is a state. So 4 states and 3 stages. And these stages are fundamentally different. And so if you're actually in the dive state, holding your breath, struggling to get through work, don't worry about other people in their own lane, just do your own thing, yet you're in the dip, it's fundamentally different to being on the other side, rise. I've come through it and things are actually improving, I'm changing. So this is what struggling is. When we have that feeling of falling through the standards, that feeling of not actually doing what we need to do, and it's actually redlining. And of course, the other side of that, we call that striving. Fundamentally different to have a tea talk if someone's actually in the dive, but actually on the way back up rather than falling through. Below survive, I can't remember who asked about where burnout is. Burnout is below survive. And so our ambition is to stop people getting as deep and not going as far and not going as long. And we work through people to normalize how we speak about this. Of course, we can gather data. We do in the program. This is an example of an organization. And we give benchmarking on using our model. And so there's the national benchmarks in the gray. And this is this team, for example. How many people were identified where they were, percentages, where they were sitting. And so you see this organization, quite a lot of people thriving and hiving, but there's actually quite a number of people also in survive. And we also give them data about which stage they're in as well. And so 21% are actually struggling, but 47% are striving. You can imagine the difference this data shows because it's quite dynamic. And so we also develop in-house go-to people. There's nothing better than their own people using their own language. And so we call them radical reps. And they get a little bit more. We do more intensive work with them. And they're not meant to be experts. They're just everyone. They could be a graduate. But they are someone who actually understands. It's a great way to actually normalize how we do this and get better at it. And we also offer psychosocial coaching. And often in these programs, people say, wow, that helps me understand. It takes a long time to transition for that. I understand I'm kind of stuck in this mode. How do I change? So let's just summarize. Backups is we actually back each other up when we raise our hands and voice and talk things through rather than talk around them. We do that because we actually have this ambition about being healthier and safer so we can perform even better. Backups is also to recognize that plan A sometimes isn't working. We need to hit the damn pause button. Backup, adapt and challenge those demands and resources, and then learn to make up backup plans. Backups is also recognizing we actually have each other's backs, especially in times of struggle and strive, and we can help each other. You can ask for help and provide it in a way, this is key, provide it in a way that really helps most, and at a time that supports us bouncing back. It's about having those conversations in a way that's thoughtful, empathetic, and authentic. What really can we do next? And it's actually understanding those three assets of time, energy, and attention, so our work is backed up. We back up technology, we should back up ourselves. And finally, it's to recognize that the code and regulations, the fundamental principle of consultation, is the best solutions to the hazards and the risks come from ourselves. And we know that actually happens at the individual, at the team, as well as a system level. So it actually takes us to have these conversations early and often at those levels. So this is back to the model I showed you before. So we're suggesting actually psychosocial safety culture is, flipping it and actually engaging in these interactive ways, being proactive to do these things so it's healthier and sustainable performance. We ditch the idea of the metaphor of the goldfish bowl, and we replace it with this idea of the 7 C's. It sounds very nautical, but we're sticking with the fish theme. And the idea is not an either or, it's an and. So regardless of our health status, and we've got 5 little avatars there, they've all got the radical on their chest. They're all not superstars. They're just willing to actually be radical or have that conversation. Know it, share it, show it, and the willingness to be radical. So I showed you this image at the beginning. Here's the image at the end. We worked our way through what the line means, how it's held up, the willingness to be radical, set of demands and resources being push and pull and feeling we're in the middle of this teeter-totter being squished. We're actually then engaging that time, energy, and tension, and of course the willingness to have those conversations as well. I had to ask Kelly and Phil permission to do this, but as you know, as an organization, you don't know, as an organization, we're very purpose-driven, and every backups program we actually donate, and we raise the profile of an organization called Bloom Asia, which supports victims of sexual trafficking, and those women, those young women. I mean, I didn't know there's 5 and 6-year-olds in brothels. It's an example of how white bread and how naive we were. But these women personify backups. And so I'm raising the story, and I invite you, visit Bloom Asia. And if you want to do more, reach out to them. They're amazing people. And so thank you very much for the opportunity to meet with you today. And thank you, Phil and Kerry. So questions?
Thanks so much, Roderick. That was an incredible presentation. I know I certainly learnt a lot today, and I'm sure everybody here on the call did as well. I've also just like to pop in a note that I've popped a link to schedule a call if you've found something that's resonated with you today and you'd like to talk a little bit further. When you book a call, just pop in that you've attended the webinar, and we'd love to connect you with Roderick as well. So a big thank you to Roderick. If there are any questions, I know we're like right on time, but if there are any questions, I'm sure Roderick would be happy to answer any questions that you might have, but appreciate everyone's time. We like to finish on the dot as much as possible. Lots of thank yous coming through for you, Roderick. Very thought-provoking.
Thanks, everyone. Please reach out on
If you
LinkedIn
do,
or...
yeah, thank you everyone for attending. If you did want to hang back and ask some questions, you're welcome to, but as Kelly said, we respect your time. So yeah, we're happy to hang back for 5 or 10 minutes, Roderick. So yeah, for those who are left, thank you so much for spending the last few years deeply researching this topic and simplifying it and making it very practical in terms of what we can do and what it means for us not to do anything. So I thought that was awesome.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Roderick.
Thanks, James. Good to see you, mate.
Cheers.